Hey, how's it going guys? It's Tekosor, and this video will serve as a supplementary one comparing the LG C4 42-inch OLED and the Samsung QN90D 43-inch NeoQLED. Both are cutting-edge TVs of the 2024 that could be used for multiple scenarios such as a PC monitor, console gaming on a smaller desk, productivity usage, etc. I've already covered each one in a dedicated review video as well as comparing them to their previous models. Finally, I've compared both against each other like in this video, but in my previous comparison, some points were missing, and some of you gave me feedback to cover them in a follow-up video. So here we are. I truly appreciate your engagement and the faith you have put into me for making those comparisons. While I still don't have the best camera equipment to give the true lifelike quality, but I hope to improve this as the channel grows. So if you find my videos useful, always remember to give them a like to help with the algorithm, and subscribe to Tekosor in case you haven't, in order to contribute in growing the channel. As always, thanks for your precious support. So, if you are wondering now what we are going to compare in this video, well, we are going to compare some productivity tasks like browsing a document to see the display latency, and talk about the ghosting issue that is present on the QN90D being a VA panel, and how it looks side by side against the C4. We also check scrolling in an internet browser to show you how it looks in that case as well. And then we are going to compare SDR and HDR gaming and talk about some useful features of each of them. And since we are not going to repeat the same stuff all over again from the previous comparison, I recommend that you watch the previous one in order to have a comprehensive idea about each TV and know its pros and cons. So without further delay, let's get right into it. Here we are in SDR mode, and before all, I want to show you the settings I have. Starting with the LG C4. For picture mode, I have the Game Optimizer 1 in order to have the lowest panel latency. In the picture advanced settings and here in the brightness, I have the OLED pixel brightness maxed out to 100. Some settings will be disabled because I have the Game Optimizer mode activated as well as connected to a PC. But we can also customize them in the Game Optimizer menu later on. I've set gamma to be T.1886 and video range to full. Now in color, I have the color gamut set to dynamic, and in the white balance, I've laid the color temperature at 0, but you are free to set it to the color temperature you prefer. I just kept it this way in order to give the bare color tone experience I received out of the box without any calibration. In clarity instead, it's going to be all disabled. And that's it for the picture. Here in the general, in the AI service, we have most of the settings off due to having Game Optimizer and PC connected, but I have turned off AI brightness change so it doesn't dynamically change the brightness. In the OLED care, I have the care picture off, and here make sure to have those OLED panel care features enabled to ensure the longevity of your OLED display. In the energy saving, I also disabled all options to maximize brightness. Now let's head on to the Game Optimizer setting. I have input lag set to boost, and all features like VRR, G-Sync, AMD FreeSync, 144Hz mode, ALLM are on. In the picture, and here based on what I found suitable, I keep the black stabilizer to 7 and the white stabilizer to 5. I also have game contrast set to 100, black level to 50, and color depth to 65. And finally, the software version I'm testing the C4 on is 3.11.5. And that's it for the C4. Now let's head on to the QN90D and explore what settings we have. Here also the picture, I have game mode on, and going to the expert settings, I have both of brightness and contrast set to the maximum value, sharpness to 10 and color to 20. I also have local dimming set to high as well as the contrast enhancer. And here we have a cool feature that is the Auto HDR remastering. I've talked about it before, but basically if you have SDR content like the case for me now, by turning this feature on, it will improve the image quality to feel somehow a bit more remastered SDR and HDR-like. I've demonstrated this feature in several comparison videos that you can watch in here. Also on the QN90D, I have the color tone set to standard in order to match it with the default parameter on the C4. Also white balance to default 0. Also for gamma, we have T.1886, but I have shadow detail to -5 in order to deepen the black levels, color space settings to native, and I'll show you later on why I choose that option. Finally, the QN90D has this new feature known by Color Booster that gives the image a bit more vividness. So what I do is keeping it set on high while reducing the original color slider a bit to not have an oversaturated image and fine control color saturation. Alright, now that we have finished with picture, let's head on to connection, then to external device manager. Here I have HDMI black level set to low, and the reason for that is because if I set it to auto or normal, it would wash out colors pretty badly, and after going back and forth trying these options, I realized that if you set HDMI black level to low, you will feel much nearer than ever to a true OLED-like experience on a QLED TV. So that's why I recommend it to low, and later on I'm going to show you some difference. This way will deepen black so much, and you can see how generally the image improves, defining objects and colors much more. Let's exit that and go to the game mode settings. Here I have dynamic black equalizer to just 1 to tune up blacks a bit. I feel that as soon as I set it to 1, the image all of a sudden looks much better. Don't know what's the magic behind it, but I don't recommend that you increase it much more, as it would wash out blacks becoming dark gray. So 1 to 2 is just quite perfect. Let's head back and get to the general menu. In the intelligent mode settings, I also have most of the AI stuff that are related to image services to be disabled due to having game mode on and PC connected. Let's get to the power and energy saving. Here I made sure that all auto brightness and energy saving features to be off to ensure optimal brightness and overall image quality possible. Also, I want to note that the current software version of my QN90D is 1120. Alright, now that we are done specifying the settings we have for SDR, let's get to answer some questions, starting with the one regarding productivity and document browsing. So here we are. You can see when I scroll down slowly, both displays have no latency issues at all, and the text isn't smearing. It's a pretty smooth reading experience at this speed, but let's increase the speed a bit, yet we can't see anything. But if we go a bit more, you can start to see the QN90D is showing us a very disturbing after image for the text, or what we can call as ghosting. So basically the text has a trail like as I scroll down, while the C4 is free from that issue. That issue is related to VA panels that is used in the QN90D. Unfortunately, if I increase the speed even more, we can see it more clearly, so the faster we go, the more annoying it becomes. This is why while I use this TV, I usually scroll a bit slowly to not experience it, or just maybe I got too used to it so that it's not annoying as before. But if you are sensitive to that kind of stuff, I think you will not like what you see, especially on first days of ownership. Like, this is surely one compromise you will have to get over. Ghosting and viewing angles are the only cons of the QN90D in my opinion. The C4 doesn't have these two issues. You can see for yourself it's showing zero signs of ghosting or text trailing. But the interesting part is that if we go too fast, we can't see the ghosting anymore, at least not for me. But in typical scrolling pace, you will still see it. Now we'll get on to web scrolling, like browsing news. Again here, if I scroll slowly, we see no issues at all. But as soon as I increase my scrolling speed, as I read the news, it's beginning to show the same symptoms. That's why it's quite annoying. The C4 not having that issue is already an advantage point. Now I want to note that this kind of effect is mostly seen in the productivity scenarios or web browsing. While gaming or watching, I could never tell there is ghosting or double image. It's more noticeable for cases I mentioned previously. Nevertheless, if you are sensitive to this kind of stuff, I think the QN90D will be odd for you. In this case, the C4 is a better choice. Now next, let's get on to the SDR gaming. Now someone in the comments told me that for the QN90D, setting the color space to auto will be better. Now I want to show you why I said to keep it on native previously. You can see that setting it to auto will shift the color space quite significantly, and it's actually not accurate at all. It's making yellow becoming like yolk yellow, also deep blue to more like sky blue. So basically it's destroying color fidelity, which is why I keep it always on native. Or additionally, you can also customize it if you want. And again, somebody else told me to keep HDMI black level to normal or auto. But also here, I want to show you why it's more ideal to keep it on low, even in SDR content. Here let's take for example a true deep black shown on the C4 being an OLED. You can see for yourself, if I set the QN90D to normal, how it's brightening blacks level significantly and more like adding a gray dust filter on the whole image. Like you can see, it's literally a gray filter across all the image, and auto will be the same as normal. So after trying different configurations, only by choosing the low option gives the true black levels much more like OLED. But if you find it quite dark, you can still use the shadow detail slider to fine-tune black levels in the gamma settings or use the dynamic black equalizer. But as for me, I find it exactly how I prefer, whether I'm gaming or working or anything else. I've set it like this once and never went back. Let's take more look at SDR gaming. You guys can see that both deliver pretty solid image quality with really decent blacks on the QN90D to much like a real OLED display. It's the closest ever you can get to an OLED level while having a QLED display. Also, we can see the brightness on the QN90D is really astonishing. Like it gets really bright thanks to the mini LEDs, but we can't help but notice how the C4 manages to have better color accuracy and image details. You can appreciate more details in busy scenes. We can also tell from this test that the QN90D has better color temperature out of the box without any calibration. If you remember, I've set both to default color temperature setting, and the C4 is leaning more to cool colors, while the QN90D colors feel more like white and better factory calibrated. That's an improvement I've noticed also compared to its previous model, the QN90C of the last year. So at the end, each of them excel in one part. The C4 produces a more realistic scene, while the QN90D tends to have more vividness and brightness generally. You can see in dark scenes how the QN90D is able to match a real OLED dark level, like blacks are almost on par, while also here you get the color vividness and impressive brightness and contrast. So that's a strong point about the QN90D, that in dark scenes it has awesome black levels, yet in a well-lit scene it's quite bright. It's actually amazing on both honestly, but the QN90D in dark scenes just look more alive, and while gaming, as I said before, you can't see any kind of ghosting, at least not for me. Now here we are in a very dark game, Alan Wake 2, and you can see if I use a flashlight, how the C4 is able to show details much more, like even though I'm directing a strong light to the ground, but I can still see the objects, while the QN90D is just too bright that you feel it's surpassing the visibility of objects. So that's what I meant when I said the C4 is able to perceive details much better. Here again, I want to show you HDMI black level on the QN90D. This will be the perfect scene to show you what I mean. Look at the C4 and its dark levels. If I have the QN90D HDMI black level set to normal, how it's adding a gray-like filter over the whole image, and it's actually killing black levels altogether. Now look what happens if I set it to low. It immediately becomes so much like an OLED with just one click, while giving you a bright light. So that's what I talked about earlier when I said how setting it to low will give a similar experience to a real OLED. Again, you can set the shadow detail and the dynamic black equalizer to brighten blacks to your liking. So yeah, you can see that both deliver pretty solid SDR gaming experience. Each one excels in one part. The QN90D with higher image luminosity, color vividness, while the C4 with better color accuracy, higher visibility of details, and of course, pitch blacks, but the QN90D has quite deep blacks as well. It just comes down to personal preference at this point. Let's now head on to HDR gaming to see what kind of changes we can get. For settings on the QN90D, I have quite the same settings, so I won't go over the same ones, but here we have Auto HDR remastering off given we are on native HDR, and I have HDR tone mapping set to active instead of static. I'll show you also later on why I prefer setting it on active. For gamma, we have only ST.2084 mode for PC. Also here I have shadow detail to -5, and that's it. But now on the external devices, I have input Signal Plus enabled to improve 4K HDR signal quality. While in the game settings, I have them the same. But however, in the Game Picture Expert, I have HDR 10 Plus Gaming to Advanced, as well as Game HDR to Advanced. Finally, I did the image calibration on Windows to create a color profile and optimize HDR on Windows 11. So you can find this app on the Windows Store. I totally recommend you calibrate your display to get the best HDR results out of it. Here on my unit, with my current settings, I have the following parameters. For minimum luminosity, I have 0.2350, and for maximum luminosity, 400. And finally, for full frame luminosity, 650. Saturation to 0, as I have already configured the saturation on the TV on settings, so I don't want oversaturated HDR image. At the end, you can name the profile and it will automatically set it on the display. Let's jump to C4 in HDR. Again, I have most of the settings as before, but here we got more unlocked features like the dynamic tone mapping, which I enabled. Additionally, the C4 has a new feature called Expression Enhancer. You can select between detail and brightness. Detail will dim feeling lights while perceiving details to make them stand out more. I've shown you before about it in its own review video. It's totally a good feature. Now, brightness option will brighten the total image, and it quite shows the difference. So for this test, I'll be going with brightness. In the game optimizer, I have the same settings as before, so no changes here at all. Now again, we need to calibrate this one in Windows 11. So here I have the same calibration app. Here, since the C4 manages to have basically infinite contrast levels like pitch blacks, we can safely put minimum luminosity to 0, which will be totally turned off pixel. For OLED, this will be the value to go with for minimum luminosity. Then in the maximum one, I could set it to 2200. As for the full frame maximum luminosity, 2250. And finally here, also for the C4, I left color saturation to default. Now we can head on to HDR gaming. Again, you can see for QN90D, setting color space in HDR to native will be better than auto, as it would wash out colors pretty badly here as well. Also, setting HDMI black levels to low will be better to give OLED-like black. If I set it to normal or auto black levels, how this time you can see the gray filter much more clearly than in SDR. And as soon as I set it back to low, it will be so much like the C4 in terms of the blackness. Also here, you can still use a dynamic black equalizer if you want to brighten blacks, but at least keeping HDMI black level to low is quite advisable. As for the HDR tone mapping on the QN90D, it comes totally to personal preference. Static will give you a bit darker HDR, but kind of dull colors, while active just enrich colors much more. For me personally, after going between the two options, I settled with active as I felt more vibrant HDR thanks to it. But generally speaking, you can see in HDR, they are both brighter, like especially in dark games like Alan Wake 2, both TVs got brighter in HDR compared to SDR. For QN90D, also here in Game Picture Expert settings, I suggest setting Game HDR to advanced. You can see the difference here between when I have it off, it's entirely washed up, basic will darken it so badly, and advanced gives the best gaming HDR results. Now let's get to the C4, and I want to show you the expression enhancer difference as well. If we have set it on off, it will be set on the default brightness, while when I have it on detail, how it's able to darken filling object to make key objects stand out more, like you can see even more details this way. As for the brightness, it will improve the brightness of the whole image. So I totally recommend playing with those features to find out what you prefer, depending also on the game type. Now that we saw HDR in a very dark scene, how it improved brightness and the quality, let's get to a brighter scene here in Cyberpunk. You can see also here how on HDR the image looks quite more vibrant, especially on the C4. It looks way brighter than when we had it on SDR. And you can see thanks to the expression enhancer plus dynamic range, it improves the image quality in many ways. Also, the image on the QN90D has improved in HDR compared to SDR. Overall, both look totally great and quite competitive. In a bright scene, they got much better in HDR, showing dark parts of the image while increasing maximum luminosity. But you can see that the C4 tends to give us more realistic colors but a bit dull at times, while the QN90D is brighter and colors are vivid but at times unrealistic. So guys, that was it for this comparison. I truly hope that it answered all your previous questions and doubts. Still, if you have any left, please don't hesitate to drop them in the comments below. I'll happily answer. Also, let me know which one you prefer after seeing this video. As you know, I'm always keen to know your thoughts about the stuff I compare. And finally, I would appreciate your support by liking this video and subscribing to Techosaur, as well as becoming a member on Patreon or here on YouTube in order to allow me to get better equipment and more monitors and TVs to review and compare in the future. Thanks for watching and for your support, and see you guys in the next one. Peace out.